Hey, I think we're live. Cool. Hey, this is, I've not done any streaming in a while, and I've got some time, so I've got a few projects that I want to start doing soon, so I thought I'd start streaming them and doing some live coding sessions. And the first one of those is going to be called Muster Minutes. It's a project that I've been playing around with for the last couple of days, thinking about, or weeks really. And I haven't really done too much on it yet. I want to kind of actually take the opportunity to live stream the whole process of building a product and designing it and developing it and all of that entails. It's a bit of a messy process, especially at the beginning when you're kind of exploring and figuring stuff out. But I wanted to do most of that as much as possible on a stream and record it and turn it into a bit of a series. So this is what we are doing today. Yeah, I think it'd be quite interesting to kind of document the process of building it out and sharing that story. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've not done much so far. I can jump straight into it. I'll show you what I've got so far. So we've got musterminutes.com is the domain that we've set up here. And the idea here is that with this platform, you'll be able to upload your kind of a recording of a meeting that you've had and turn that into some helpful meeting minutes, action-orientated meeting minutes. So in the process, we're going to look at some platforms. I've been looking a little bit. I've been trying not to do too much before streaming, but I've been looking at platforms like AWS Transcribe. I think that's going to be the platform of choice for creating the transcription from our meeting recording. So we'll be looking at AWS as part of our infrastructure there. That's Amazon Web Services. And after I have those transcriptions, the plan is to use OpenAI and generate some meeting minutes based off those transcriptions, and we'll kind of build a bit of a process around managing those minutes. Perhaps we'll also touch on agenda as well. This is something that I've been kind of playing around with using for some minutes that I produce at the moment as part of the Aero Club committee that I'm a part of on the side. And so yeah, that's the plan there. If anyone watching wants to kind of reach out and chat, happy to kind of have people follow along and interact with viewers along this as we go as well. I think before jumping into, I've not done a single line of code yet apart from this one page here. These graphics as well, by the way, these are also produced by ChatGPT. So I'm using ChatGPT Plus there and using DALL-E free to generate those. So I've got a little character here, kind of a little bit inspired by Loki, Miss Minutes. But Muster Minutes is a friendly helper to help people create their meeting minutes. And I've also got a few ideas as well, which we'll touch on as we get into a bit more of that stuff around kind of pricing and how we'll set some of that stuff up. But that's going to be much further down the line, I think. And yeah, I'm kind of excited to jump in this project really. So before kind of jumping straight into the code, I want to kind of, for my benefit, but also for your benefit, kind of outline a few of the kind of flows that I'm thinking about as we're looking at building this. So I switch between Miro and OmniGraffle quite a lot. Both are essentially kind of whiteboarding apps in my context, in the way that I use them. And one of the things I quite like to do is this concept called breadboarding from ShapeUp, kind of documented by 37 Signals, kind of product development methodology that they use there. And so the first thing I tend to do is like, I've got a few ideas. I've built a few little random pieces that create minutes and stuff. But there's a bit of a flow that I want to kind of, that I've got in my head that I want to iron out. And so we're going to jump around quite a lot while we do this, but I'm going to start sketching it out. So there will be one screen. I know that like step one is we have a meeting recording and we need to take that and go through some sort of process to get to the final result, which is our meeting minutes. So there'll be some sort of upload recording screen. And what I tend to do is kind of use this notation here where I'll kind of create that bold and underline it there. And that will be a place. Sorry. That will be a place that you can go in the app. And we're going to call it upload recording for now. We might come up with some new names later as we go, but that will suffice for now. On that screen, we'll have some sort of like file upload affordance. upload file button, like place to upload the file, and then you will kind of submit that. There'll be a button there as well. So that's a button there to submit that upload recording. Now, from there, we're going to probably take the user somewhere. Now, let's just set that up. Cool. So, yeah, we talk about these being like affordances, and then this being a place. So you've got a place where there are these more affordances. Some of those affordances keep you on the screen, like upload file, that will be a file upload input, and then a submit button where you kind of go through that step will kind of take you onto the next place. Now I'm just going to think here for a little bit about what happens with upload recording. So you upload a recording, you've got your file, it's going to take some time. And so there might even be like a comeback later. Like I don't know yet how long this process is going to take. So I'm going to create a little note here to myself, like how long will it take to transcribe recording? That's a bit of a question that we need to know, we need to come back to. So I'm going to note that down there. This is quite useful to just do as we're going through the process. Well, that's something we're going to have to explore and learn about. So we submit that. So we might want to take them to some sort of holding place to say like, hey, like we may want to just say, we'll email you when we're ready. But ignoring that, let's say it's instant for now. Let's say you instantly get your transcription. We'll probably want to take you to some sort of like transcription editor. Edit/view transcription maybe. It's probably where we want to take you there. And at that point, you'll be able to kind of confirm that the transcription's right. We always know that like these transcription services, while they're really great right now, they have their downsides. They're not quite perfect. And so we will take you to the view transcription page. Now I think on here what we'll have is we'll probably have some way of viewing the original file. Watch/listen to original recording. That's probably going to be quite useful. Like if you're watching or viewing this transcription, one of the concerns you'll have is, did this transcribe the thing right? I know when I've been doing some of these meeting minutes and doing transcriptions on them, I've wanted to check back the original source material to check that what it wrote is what was said. Hey, one day back by 8. Thanks for the follow. I don't have any alerts right now, so I have to keep checking over here on my second screen, but thanks for the follow. Yeah. I need to get my alerts set up at some point, but we'll definitely get to that at some point. But thank you for the follow again. Cool. So we'll watch and listen to the original recording. The next thing we'll want to do is have some sort of way of kind of seeing the output of the recording, output of the transcription rather. And I think for that, what we'll probably do is like there'll be many different messages here. So there'll be some sort of partial probably that I need to kind of come up with a word to describe a message or a sentence that someone said potentially, or a kind of, I guess message probably works here. Let's just go with messages for now. I'm not sure on the word there. I don't want to spend too long on that. So what I'll tend to do right now is just jump to ChatGPT and kind of explain the problem to ChatGPT and have it come up with a few ideas around how we might name this thing. I'm building a transcription app, and the editor, how would I describe the things that each person says as a collection? I can't quite get the words right there. Dialogue might be an exchange. So I think what I'm looking for is So we know we have speakers. What I'm trying to do here is build out a bit of a kind of domain language, a kind of set of phrases and terminology that kind of have a relationship between each other. And I think what I'm looking for here is, so we know we have speakers. There are speakers in the conversation, and those speakers say something, basically. Those speakers have many, like if we were thinking about this in a kind of object domain entity relationship approach, we would say that kind of a car has many passengers. And in this context, we're kind of saying that speakers have many kind of dialogues, potentially. Something. And hey, Moral Ferro, thanks for the follow. Cheers for following along there. We say those speakers have something, so what do they have? Utterances. A unit of speech. I think that's what we were looking for. Like, there are many entries, maybe, or segments. Verbal contributions feels a bit verbose. Each of those could be timestamped. Yeah, so that's the plan there. So essentially, we're kind of creating these entries in the transcript. Maybe they are just transcript entries. Each transcript entry is from a speaker, potentially. Utterance, I guess utterance feels like the word. The last or most external entry. Actors sounding or expressing with voice. In spoken language analysis, utterance is a continuous piece of speech. Yeah, so I guess utterance is probably the right term here. So let's just go like utterances. Such a horrible word though. I think I'm just going to go with entries for now. I'm not going to overthink it too much. I just felt like messages was the wrong thing. I feel like transcription entry probably makes more sense. And we have this kind of concept of a transcription entry. Utterances, transcription entry. What else did we talk about here? We kind of verbal contribution. Speech segment. I don't like that. Verbal contribution. I don't really like the term contribution in there. I think those are interesting just to keep a record of. I think transcription entry is probably what we'll go for. Down here on a breadboard, what I'm doing here is I'm just going to create this little partial. So the idea here is that within this entries, we'll encapsulate a set of UI logic called entry. Getting unstable on the stream. Let me know if anyone is struggling to watch on the chat and see how that goes. If it's a problem, then I can try to recover that. Just check, sorry. Looks healthy on the other stream there. Cool. Yep. Cool. Is that going to recover? Let's see. I'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully, I don't think I've got anything coming up on OBS, so hopefully it's just Twitch's side and that recover will come through. Yeah. So the edit view transcription, we've got our set of entries there, and we're going to kind of create this line here to this entry. We know that we've got this entry. This entry has the speaker. Each entry has a speaker, and perhaps the entry has their utterance. Like maybe that's how that worked. So the transcription has many entries, and in each entry there is a speaker and an utterance. So we're kind of building out our domain here. I want to pull this up to there, so let's just do that. Now this is kind of this place within a place, and so in order to indicate that, I've done an underscore at the front here just to kind of indicate some of that. And we're thinking about this in a few different levels all at the same time. So we're thinking about how the domain language is shaping up, how the UI is looking, what the flow through this experience is like for those people that are using this tool. And so we're kind of thinking about all of these things at different levels, and traditionally you might think about those as separate disciplines, like the domain language, or some of that being kind of a lot of a code logic. Like you can see some of these classes being objects in our domain. I tend to think of them all as one thing. Like when we come onto the coding side, what we'll be doing is modeling the real world and modeling some of the stuff that we're building. So for now, I think we'll probably shape some of that stuff up later as well, but for now it's a useful experience to go through all this stuff. So we have our entries, speaker utterances. We're going to need some UI to be able to change some of that stuff. Rai-chan, how's it going? I've not seen you in ages, man. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. Cool. And let me know if the stream's okay as well, because Twitch is telling me it's unstable. So, see how that goes. Not too bad, don't know. Entries. Awesome. Cheers, thank you. Latency seems to be pretty low as well, so that's good. Yeah, I'm building out a little bit of a product at the moment, so it's going to be this muster minutes is the concept that I'm kind of building out. And it turns meeting recordings into kind of meeting minutes that could be shared and distributed to tell what happened in a meeting. Kind of a problem that I have at the moment I'm trying to solve for myself. It takes a few hours to write these minutes at the moment, and I want to do it with AI. At some point, we'll see. And then let's see. So after the entries, watch the original recording, the entries. At some point there'll be a kind of move on to the next phase. I don't necessarily want to get too much into the editing of this transcription just yet. I think there will be some UI for like making edits and how all of this works. I think it's going to be quite hard to note that down at this stage, and I need to explore that UI by actually building some of it. But at some point you'll be kind of happy to proceed. Generate minutes, perhaps, and minute generation place. Like I don't know how that might fit best. Let's see. Meeting generation. Again, I guess we don't really know how long it's going to take to transcribe the minutes. The other bit that I've been noticing when I've been doing this, actually, and I think this is perhaps somewhere where we'll delete this stuff quickly, is I find it helps to match the transcription up to some sort of agenda. Generally our meetings that we do have a fairly strict agenda, and we follow through that agenda. And one of the other challenges actually that I'm remembering now when I've gone through this process is, and I'll make a note of this just on my whiteboard somewhere, is just the token limitation can be reached fairly quickly with transcriptions. And I think if I go on OpenAI's documentation, that platform, I never really remember. API reference. We go to the chat. One of the, or the models perhaps. Do they have the models listed somewhere? That's the endpoints, not the actual models. Documentation. GPT-4. the max tokens is 8,000. They have the 32k model, but I don't think that I have access to the 32k model in my login. I've just noticed I'm not logged in either, so I need to log in at some point. But anyway, we know that the token limitation can be fairly quickly reached, especially if you have a large meeting. I think I took one of my meeting transcriptions the other day and was looking at how many tokens that was. In fact, I think I can probably grab that and see. The CD, the minutes. I put them in there. I think I put them into. Oh, I know where they are actually, but anyway, it's quite easy to reach those limits fairly quickly. And so one of the techniques and approaches that I looked at doing and worked quite well for me when I was doing that was to break down the transcription into smaller segments by the agenda. So it was almost a transcription for each agenda. So what we have in this flow at the moment is this transcription for the whole meeting, but actually we kind of want to assign a selection of these entries to the agenda. And kind of say, okay, like this group of entries matches to this agenda. So I think we have all of these entries. We probably also have like agenda points as a place on there as well. And for each agenda point, there's probably going to be some sort of concept of a title, like, so each agenda point has some sort of topic, maybe, rather than title, like topic. And I think each one of these probably has a selection of entries as well. And so what you're probably doing is perhaps these are uncategorized entries. And so through this process, what you're probably doing is moving these entries into the agenda points. And you can probably select multiple. I'm not sure I feel like this is the right flow. So what I'm thinking about is there's probably two different ways we can create these agenda point markers. And I think one way is we treat them as a marker in the timeline, so in the transcription. So we have our recording and we say, okay, at point A, like at 10 minutes in, we start talking about agenda point A. At 15 minutes, we start talking about agenda point B. 25 minutes, we start talking about C. And we kind of create these markers about when we start talking about a new topic. In which case, those could potentially be entries as well. Like if we think about our model, we've got our transcription, we've got entries, maybe entries and markers. It's like two different things that can be in a transcription at a point in time. The result of these markers is that we want to be able to extract and grab a set of entries that happen between two timestamps, because we want to say, okay, for agenda point A, give us all of the entries. We're going to go take those away and generate some transcription, generate the minutes. So that could be interesting. Let's think about that. very different to main model there. I don't particularly like this way of categorize, like kind of having the entries like kind of have an agenda. Like this feels more like the entries have an agenda point. That does make sense. I also need to think a little bit about how you might want to. Sometimes in a meeting you start talking about one topic, you move on to the next agenda point, but then someone brings it back to a previous agenda point, and that gets a little bit messy. And so perhaps this idea that you kind of categorize each entry as relating to an agenda point might make sense, but it also potentially brings stuff out of context in the conversation. So that's pretty tricky. But you could still do that with markers, like if you had these kind of entries and markers that you have. Let's just. So what I like to do here is actually create two versions. So we're gonna mock out both versions. So let's just I'll delete all of this for a second. We've got the original recording. Watch, listen to original recording. We're gonna do like entry and markers as like a list of things. And we'll have a marker which is going to kind of, all of these things are going to have timestamps, right, is the idea. And we'll have our entry as well, which we'll grab from up there. We'll just move that down, wrap that there. We'll have a timestamp for our marker as well, and then marker. So the marker will have an agenda point that it relates to, and that's probably like, we'll come into the agenda point later, but I think that's its own thing, and perhaps a separate perhaps at some point you have some way of like, okay, this recording relates to this agenda. You could upload the agenda or create that agenda in the system, and you pick which agenda point you put there. Essentially, for our context, this just means it's a title, like it's the topic. It's the only thing we really have under the agenda point at the moment. And this is basically to say that, okay, as you're reading through the transcription, 10 minutes, marker goes in, we talked about topic A, 25 minutes, talked about topic B. And then in terms of querying that, I think we can query if we're querying the entries by timestamp and the markers give us when we talked about things, we can find out the times we started and stopped talking about a given topic, and then we can query the entries for that topic. So that could work. I kind of don't want to get too much into how the database query and all of that stuff might work, because we'll get into kind of performance there a little bit and figuring about that. What I really want to focus on here is the flow. And I feel like this as a user experience flow probably makes more sense, because you're just reading through the transcription, you're seeing your entries, and you're like, that's where I started talking about a new topic. I can add that marker in. And this is a bit of a manual process at the moment. The other thing that I want to think about is how we speed this whole process up, and perhaps this can be done by AI at some point to identify when we started talking about these topics and add these markers in. I think this is a pretty quick job to just run through the transcript and go, okay, we started talking about that topic there. Like, generally in these meetings, we have a chairperson who says, okay, thanks, we're going to move on to the next topic now. Topic's going to be this, and introduces it. So it's usually pretty clear to just run through the transcript, see where these points are, and add them in, or separate them out. So we'll do that, I think. The other approach that I was thinking about before, does that still make sense? So the other approach was where we have this kind of idea that actually you I guess this is a little bit more like actually reading through a text file. So if you had a text file of the transcription and it was kind of like speaker 1, hello, speaker 2, it's fruit, hey, and kind of went through this process of all of this stuff. If I group these and selected them, like the idea here is I'm selecting them, I've selected the first 2 entries, and then I would say kind of, okay, this is this topic, and then I'd select the next group and kind of go, this is topic 2. And that was the idea here a bit more maybe. But as the marker approach does feel like it's a bit more like I don't have to scroll all the way down to the next entry. I can just add the marker in. So there's the 2 differences there. One is I have to find the start and the end and then mark all of that as part of an agenda point. The second one is I have to just find the start of the conversation about that topic and then mark that in there with that. Yeah. And actually finding the start and then having to find the end kind of feels a little like a bit verbose, because I guess this, like, the end will just be the start of the next one. So you can just look for the next marker based on its timestamp, and the timestamp is what's going to be used to kind of position it. Timestamp's another interesting thing. I think we probably use some sort of relative date time, number of seconds, kind of milliseconds or something, as a timestamp, because that's just an integer. We can use that as indexing then. And then, yeah, I think what we'll have is the agenda point can then query its markers, find out the times when it was discussed, and then it can get its entries through the markers. So it's almost like the agenda point has many entries through markers. Not quite entirely accurate, because markers just have the timestamp and don't actually give you the entries, but it's kind of determined through markers. So that will be an interesting kind of query and thing to write as we get into that. Cool, fine. I think this marker approach is probably the ideal approach there. So I think what I'll do is take that out and that, and then we'll bring that back up there, and we'll bring our stuff back. And marker and entry can go up there. That's just a reminder, so I'm going to just throw that back up. We're going to have entries and markers. I don't really... I'm thinking a little bit about the relationship there and how we're going to have those in there. And how we're going to query those things together as one list. Cool, fine. We'll kind of come to that, but I think for the UI, this approach makes sense. As we've got that now, we probably need to have some sort of UI for add marker, and probably edit marker and stuff like that as well. But I'm going to assume that the edit logic's in there. Add marker and add entry as well, for that matter. But that will be, I guess, between each of the entries and markers, essentially. So between this list of things will be those. I'm wondering here whether actually the flow is a little bit more like this, where, let's get rid of this arrow for a second. What we probably have is actually the utterance perhaps is its own thing. And again, this is a partial on the page, so it'll be an underscore. And perhaps entry has some sort of polymorphic entryable. And the entryable is either going to be a marker or an utterance. Again, I'm going to underscore that. This word here, like this is probably a bit more Rails kind of logic, but essentially what we're saying here is that the transcription has many entries, and an entry can either be a marker or an utterance, and each one of those entries happen at a point in time. And an utterance just says that someone, speaker, said something. We'll have text here. Shuddering Asol. I don't know how to pronounce your username there, sorry, but thank you for the follow. Really appreciate it. This is the first stream I've done in a while. I've done some streams in the past. Hello, sorry for bothering you. I want to offer promotion of your channel. Thank you, but no thank you. Quite happy to. We're going quiet for a little while, and we'll see what we pick up along the way. But thank you for the offer. But yeah, I don't. Not looking for any promotion right now. Just kind of taking it chill, taking it easy. We're not kind of investing too much into this. If people come across it, and they enjoy it. So. Anyway, so we're doing the entryable here, and I was saying that this is either a marker or an utterance. There's kind of a polymorphic, kind of is the word we'd use there to describe that kind of situation where this could be one or the other. And what we're doing is we're giving the entryable a timestamp and giving it a relationship to a transcription. And the marker creates a point, say, hey, we started talking about this, and the utterance says that the speaker said something. Cool. And then there'll be a way of adding those entries. The add entry. I guess this really could be. And actually, what we can do here is. What we're going to do here is we're going to just say that the transcription. We're going to show all of the entries. And this is starting to look a little bit better now, I think. So the transcription shows all of its entries. Each entry shows its timestamp, and it shows some information about the thing that's entered into the transcription. If it's a marker, we'll show the agenda point and say, hey, you started talking about this topic. If it's an utterance, we'll show the speaker and what they said. And then below that, we'll give them the option to add a new entry. And that will kind of modify that. I think that makes sense. One of the things that I'm kind of a little bit cautious about is how I know that in the transcription editor, like this flow as a domain makes a lot of sense to me, I think, but one of the things I'm kind of concerned about is how transcription. The original transcription service, when we're using AWS Transcribe, is going to get things wrong. And so I'm going to need to merge utterances. I'm going to need to potentially delete utterances. I'm going to need to create new utterances in that process. And I'm thinking about the UI there and how that works, and I want to make it super seamless and stuff. And so I'm just a little bit concerned about how some of that merging and separation logic, like splitting, merging utterances together. Because I've definitely seen the transcription get it wrong, where it's like when people speak over each other, what will happen is one person, it will start get confused about who's the person speaking. And that process is called diarization. And it will start getting confused about who's speaking. But So I think it's something we'll have to come up with and see. But actually, I feel like this domain logic structure, UI structure, probably makes the most sense. Where some of the challenges probably come in and some of those concerns perhaps is more around the interaction design. And that's not something we can necessarily dive into at this high level with the breadboard approach, the flow approach that I'm looking at the moment. And so I think that's something we'll have to explore as we start building it. But we kind of know that that's a problem that we need to solve. And if I'm shaping this up for a project for someone else to work on, then I'd be thinking about how that might be something I'd need to explore a bit more, as to know whether that's a closed problem. Is this a problem that we kind of has some solution that we know about, or is it an open problem? Do we know, like, how known is the problem? Is there a lot of unknowns in there? What's the risk involved? But I think we'll come across it when we come across it, and we'll solve it then. Really what we're trying to do is make sure we're not putting ourselves in a corner with some of this stuff. So we're going to be able to add entries. I don't want an arrow there, get rid of that. So between each entry, kind of above and below, we want the ability to insert, like a kind of insert new entry. What did we talk about earlier as well? Like we want to kind of like merge with next entry. Let's move these entryables up there. And one way you could think about this is a button, but actually these are just affordances, and one of the affordances could be that you just press backspace. Like I'm thinking about this as in terms of a big rich text kind of input editor. And I think you should easily be able to kind of just go, okay, no, they didn't say that, backspace, and kind of, or it merges with the previous or the next one. It probably makes sense to merge with previous entry. You're kind of working your way down through the document. And rather than reading ahead, it's easier to see what you've just read. So kind of merge with previous entry probably makes more sense. Same with insert new entry is probably actually, that feels more like going forward. This is like, this is you pressing enter, this is you pressing backspace. Those are the kind of controls linked up with those affordances, I think, rather than these being kind of buttons. I think that's a good point actually, because I've written entry here, and really this could be utterance. But also we kind of want to add in the ability to add a new marker, insert marker here. And so those, I want to do that. Let's bring that back. Insert marker is probably going to come up with like some sort of UI to like add new marker. I don't think we need to necessarily dive into what that looks like. I think that's just a new marker. It's going to be just an agenda point. We haven't really dived into that right now, but we'll kind of come to that. Cool. And yeah, so fine. So we've got our kind of merge with previous entry. We've got our ability to add our markers in, and we can merge it with a previous entry. And what else might we want to do? Insert a new utterance. We're obviously editing the utterance as well. So like, I think by nature, like this is a view/edit screen. And so it should feel like an editor. So all of these things, the utterances, the markers, once they're on there, these are also editing as well as, so these are forms essentially. Like this isn't just a view, this is actually editing the speaker and the text. These are not, these are actually inputs essentially on our page. And I think that probably captures all that we need at the moment for like this entry marker utterance system, this collection of stuff. And yeah, let's just yeah. So once we've got this, and actually this might be a good kind of first place to aim for. I mean, even just having a process where I can upload the file and view and edit the transcription is probably a good, or just view, not even edit, just view the transcription is probably a good place to aim for. I think the transcription is going to come across as JSON. We're going to have to pull that down. There's going to be a whole process there around like jobs and queuing and stuff. And then I'm going to convert that JSON into our database structure and our kind of domain entity structure. With the entries and utterances, we won't have the markers. The markers is something that the person adds at this stage. Once they have marked it all up, we probably need, I mean, there'll be some way of there's some validation step as to whether we can go and generate the minutes. We might need you to add more markers in and subdivide agenda points, and I think that makes sense. Like, I feel like we can do that pretty easily with the structure that we've got here. At some point though, we do want to kind of create the meeting minutes, and so generate minutes is going to be the affordance there. Let's just grab that and bring that up and out. Minutes config, like that's a horrible phrase, very technical, but like one of the things I'm thinking about here is like, how do we want to define the minutes config there? How should we set that up? I'm thinking there's lots of configuration I can do here at some point. So you could give it your own style of minutes and say, hey, like, I like my minutes like this, because I think that's the other thing that I'm thinking about. Not every company, every individual is going to create their minutes in the exact same style, and they probably want to maintain the style of the minutes they're already using. Because I feel like there's this element of not wanting to be obvious that they're AI transcription, AI generated minutes. And so one of the things I did in the minutes that I produced was that I fed it an example from a previous meeting minutes that I manually wrote up, or someone had manually wrote up, and used that as kind of the seed almost for the new minutes. There's a little bit of a fine tuning setup there, I think, as well, that we could consider doing. I think for the version 1, probably don't need to worry about that too much. And so there is probably a kind of loading process screen. And how I approach that is probably interesting. Also, the other thing to think about is these things are going to come in at different times, because we're not generating the minutes with one AI process. We're gonna break it down by each agenda point. And so what we really should see is agenda point 1 transcript minutes. Like the minutes are going to kind of be ready at different times. And the other thing that might be interesting to do here as well is just streaming these in as well, because I quite like otherwise it's going to feel like it takes too long, this part. I think the transcription part is probably a little bit easier to get away with. Like having a wait, but maybe the minute's not, because you're kind of in the process of actually doing the thing at this point. You've set some time aside. And this process should be no more than 10 minutes really to generate all of the minutes. Perhaps even quicker, like a few minutes. So we can do these kind of in parallel potentially. I think for now what we're going to probably do is just do like a few minutes screen, not worry too much about editing, and we'll just quickly do that. So agenda point, again we're going to show the agenda points here. again, this is partial, so this will be the agenda point partial. And then there will be the minutes. This is a bit confusing. You've got your minutes and then you've got your agenda point. Again, let's jump back to ChatGPT. We talked about earlier. Okay, moving on. I'm now creating minutes on the transcription. I'm broken down the minutes by agenda point. Describe the minutes. And I don't want to use that reuse that word because it's going to get confusing. Like summary, proceedings, overview, report, notes. All of those probably make sense as a term. So you have your minutes is the collection, the whole document. And then the summary of each. I mean, I guess that's the thing. Perhaps there's each agenda point probably has not just minutes, but like the minutes consists of several agenda points, and for each agenda point you have a summary and outcome. Like perhaps there's like defined sections of each agenda point. Like here's the reflection, here's the analysis, here's the summary. Like all you could imagine those all being part of that. I think for now what we'll just do is we'll just do summary. For each point we have a summary in the minutes. That probably won't be where the domain language goes in the actual application when we're building it, but I think that will probably fit for now. And so you have your agenda point, and for each agenda point you have your summary. We might stream those in real time. We might just dump them in as they appear. I think. So we'll probably want some sort of status indicator first. Like, hey, like, are we generating them? Generating, error, done, like that kind of thing. We've got our agenda point, we've got a summary. The other thing that we probably want to do is have some sort of way of like export minutes. And so I don't know how we're going to export them yet. That's probably maybe print with PDF. Like generating a PDF, perhaps docx at some point. Perhaps it's just a text document, maybe you can copy and paste. I don't fully know yet, and I don't necessarily want to dive too deep in that at this stage. Fine. But that's the process there. So you generate the minutes. What we'll add here is generating minutes requires certain conditions to be met, i.e. entries, token count, estimated token count of agenda points, and like utterances maybe. Below the max limit. I think that's probably the only one, but like perhaps that's something we should just have on here is like requirements for minute generation. Perhaps that's something that we need to have in there. Yeah. Cool, okay. So we upload our file. So what I'd like to do now is, like, we've got something that actually feels like there's something here that you could flow through end to end. What I like to do is just kind of visualize in my head, look at what we've got on the screen here with the flow, and see how a user might flow through it in order to achieve their kind of progress that they want to make and do. So they're going to upload a recording, they're going to upload a file, they're going to submit that file and upload it. That will make sense. I've got my recording from, I'm actually using Skype, but it could be Zoom, it could be Teams, it could be Google Meet, it could be like an audio recording off my phone. It could be an audio file, it could be a video file, regardless, they can upload it. There's probably going to be some time delay here, and I think we'll extend this flow out at some point. And I think what I will do is probably just have some sort of way of capturing like an email address and asking to upload, but I don't want to focus too much on that right now. I can watch it through the back end and see where it's at, so I can see the status of it anyway. So I think we'll just follow through and see on that. This is probably going to create some sort of job, and perhaps this view transcription will just say, hey, we don't have a transcription yet. And then when the job finishes, it'll come back and do that, perhaps. So this is probably not creating a new, like, there's probably this concept of like a new meeting. So Master Minutes probably has like a whole set of meeting. Like, perhaps you start this at the beginning and you upload the recording. And then that meeting has its transcription. So it's like, actually, you're not referencing it by transcription ID, you're referencing it by the meeting. So you create your new meeting, you give your meeting a name, whatever. You upload your recording. After uploading the recording, the transcription gets generated and put into the system. We're now here, we can watch and listen to the recording, check any issues with that. We can look through the entries. We'll see timestamps for each entry. For each entry, we might have an utterance, which will show us the speaker and what they said. Or we might have the option of inserting a marker, where we can then specify what agenda point was discussed. For now, I kind of want to be fairly loose on the agenda point definition, but at some point, perhaps, again, we're in the context of a meeting back here. We can perhaps have like an agenda creator that generates the agenda for us initially anyway. You can then, this is probably getting on in a future bit, but you'll have the ability to edit the utterances and insert a new utterance, merge with a previous utterance, able to make all of those changes. Again, I'm concerned a little bit here about what the experience is going to be a bit like if you needed to like bulk delete utterances. I think we can make that work with the way that we're going to build it. I think that kind of, if you selected 20 utterances and said, actually, that's all gone, delete. I don't know why you do that unless transcription really failed for you, but it's something that you probably need to consider. But you can check the transcription, you can add the markers in. So your job mainly is, when you come to this screen, is to add the markers in. Find the points where the conversation changed topic, add the markers in. That will then satisfy the requirements for minute generation. And then at that point, you'll be able to generate the minutes. When you generate the minutes, we'll take you to a view minutes screen for that meeting. and that minutes will have a status because obviously we're generating them. There'll be some sort of asynchronous flow there that's happening, and we will be generating them. Then there'll be an error, or it'll be done. And then for each agenda point, based upon the markers that we previously had, we will get a summary for each agenda point and show that to the user on the screen, and then give them the option of exporting those minutes to a PDF or a CSV, or like not CSV, but some sort of text document that they could export or print those with. That's the plan, I think, for what we're going to be building. We are about an hour into the first stream, so I think that's pretty good to have this kind of shape of what we want. This doesn't mean this is exactly what we'll build, but it's a bit of a shape around the flow of what that might look like. You'll also note that I've not put stuff in here around signing up or logging in or payment. What I really like to do when I'm kind of designing or building something like this is really start in the center, and the center of that really feels like this flow of upload the recording, get a transcription, generate some minutes. And what I don't want to worry about too much to begin with is the quality of that, or any of the incidental details around that whole process, like users and signing up. That's all stuff that we can add in later quite easily. We can easily assign all of these things to a particular user. And also we don't have any production data right now as well, so it's quite easy for us to just throw everything away in the database and kind of add fields, add columns, add details to each one of these concepts. One thing that might be useful to do here is just kind of do a bit of a list, perhaps, or post-it notes perhaps, of all of the different entities we have, and perhaps the relationship between them at this point as well. We've got our flow, and this is very much from a user perspective, and my ad is about to start, so we'll snooze that for 5 minutes. Yeah, and so we have our flow through the platform from a user perspective, and one of the things that I quite like to do is just have a bit of a view of what this looks from a database layer perspective. So what I'm going to do is create post-it notes. We're going to create them in a different color. Let's just go with go with blue for now. So we have a meeting. We have a recording. We have a transcription as a concept. We have a transcription entry. So let's bring that font size down. Make sure they're all the same font size. Meeting, recording, transcription, transcription entry. What else do we have? For each entry we have like a utterance. We'll have a marker. I might even kind of transcription utterance as like a thing there. These are kind of only really relevant in the context of the transcription, really will be interfacing with the transcription entry most of the time. I wonder about the transcription entry also being namespaced, and actually that's something that I'm not sure about yet. Perhaps we'll ask ChatGPT for some suggestion or some advice there. What else do we have? We've got the minutes, we've got our entries, our transcription, our recording. We obviously have our minutes as a thing. Is there actually a thing in the database for minutes? Perhaps not, actually. Like, perhaps minutes is just a view. What we do have, though, is this like idea of an agenda point keeps coming up. where's a mod when you need them? Yeah, auto mod is a thing. I think that perhaps probably could have done something there, but for some reason also. So here's a weird thing as well, that it only seems to have the option to pin the message or reply, and I'm like, actually, where are the mod controls in the view that I'm looking at? But show mod icons. Oh, there's a manual message. There we go. Can auto mod purge those type. I don't know. But I've got it now. Yeah, the only reason I didn't do that sooner was because I didn't see where the button was. And actually Twitch hides that button under a like show mod icons toggle. But hey, let's deal with that now. Cool. So we have our agenda point that actually comes up quite a lot in the flow we've got here. And then there is kind of the minutes, generated minutes summary, minutes. I kind of don't want to call it minutes, but also generated summary or something. I'm not sure about this bit. I feel like it needs its own. I mean, I could store it on the agenda point. Like, I don't necessarily need. So let's just actually. We've got these different terms. Let's just map them out. So we have a meeting. The meeting has one recording. The meeting also has ads are about to start. I don't know how to tell when it's actually going to start. Oh, it's up there. That's the timer. So there'll be an ad in a minute that I can't snooze. But actually, that's a good time for me to take a break as well in a minute. While we've got this minute, I think what I'll do is just kind of quickly map this out. So we have a meeting. It has a recording. It'll also have a transcription. Actually, like, the transcription doesn't really need to hold anything. A little bit like the agenda point, we don't need a concept called agenda. The meeting just has many transcription entries, and the meeting also has many agenda points. And so those are actually what we're referring to in these kind of ideas. The transcription entry has one of these. And what I'll quickly do in here is to say has one, has many, and has many. Cool. And we'll pause there, I think, while we take a break. Oh, that's the pre-roll ads that are on. Take an ad break to disable them. Fine. I don't seem to have a button there to Fine, let's do ad break anyway, just so that avoids the pre-roll being on. Yeah, and I'll take a break then as well. Cool. I'll be back in a moment. While the ads are on, I think what I'll do is just quickly tidy up some of this, and also I'll finish this off as well. This is going to be a has one. Obviously, we talked about this being a has one of kind of relationship deal. So the meeting has a recording, it has many transcription entries, and it has many agenda points. This has one agenda point. The other bit that might be worth doing here actually is when I create the meeting, having the concept of participants in the meeting. Cool. Awesome. Looks like those ads are finished, so cool. Yeah, let's see how that works. So I've not done much here. I'm just tidying up some of these things. I've added the has one to the transcription utterance and the transcription marker. The marker, I also identified that has one of these agenda points. And so this kind of relates the transcription entry points and creates a point with these agenda points. Obviously, those agenda points belong to the meeting. The meeting has many of those agenda points. The other thing that I was just starting to look at here was this idea of kind of recording the participants of the meeting. Something I noticed or remembered from creating a test transcription with AWS Transcribe, which is the service we'll be using to transcribe the recordings, was that it benefits if you tell it how many participants are going to be in the session. Now, it doesn't necessarily mark those people as the speaker, that you can't tell it whose name and it's going to figure out the name. It doesn't do that. So it just does speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. But it's useful to know how many people are in the meeting. And so I was wondering whether it makes sense to kind of record who was in the meeting. The other bit that we do in our minutes as well is kind of record when the meeting started, and there's some metadata about that that'll obviously be on the meeting. But this idea that there are some participants feels like it makes sense to record, and like their names and stuff like that. The transcription utterances are kind of spoken by someone, and actually the utterance has a participant, has one as speaker, I guess is kind of the idea there. Those are very close together now. That's kind of awkward. Let's maybe grab that there. Grab that there. In this weird kind of spider web. So the marker has an agenda point. The utterance has a speaker. And perhaps that makes sense because, yeah. There is some process here that I'll need to consider, that how do I take those utterances and then link them to a speaker, because okay, so it will create the transcription, it will do speaker 1, the like perhaps let's say there's several hundred utterances from speaker 1. I don't necessarily want to go through every single one of those several hundred utterances to then say that speaker 1 is Bob, speaker 1 is Bob, speaker 1 is Bob. I just want to say one time speaker 1 is Bob, and then have all of the utterances update. And so really what I want to do there isn't really change the utterance, but actually change the speaker itself, and perhaps create some sort of alias or marker or something, because I don't want to be, again, modifying several hundred utterances. What I want to be doing is just saying this speaker 1 is Bob. Now at some point I might need to say you got it wrong there and modify the utterance not to be speaker 1 anymore, but to actually be speaker 3, and speaker 3 will be Jeff, let's say. And so perhaps what we're doing here is kind of creating a bit of a token system here where actually the utterance does have one speaker, but really it's through some sort of intermediary system that is going to map the speaker ID to that participant. And so perhaps what we have is kind of some sort of transcription speaker. And so when we're creating our transcription entries and creating the transcription, what we're going to probably do is create, okay, there's 5 speakers. And so each utterance has one of these. And really what I should be using is some of these symbols, but what we'll do is for now, we'll just do the text. Has one. Can I rotate the text? Doesn't look like it. But the utterance has one speaker. And then the participants. Now, do they belong to a speaker or do they have a speaker? I think it's the other way around. Each speaker has one participant. Like each person who speaks is a participant in the meeting. And so what we're saying here is, okay, we've got a meeting, we've got our transcription entries. The transcription entries are made up of utterances and markers, but we'll ignore those for a second. The utterances are from a speaker, and the speaker, anyone who speaks in the meeting, is a participant in the meeting, and so there's a relationship there between those two things. We'll also have has many here, and just create that relationship. And I think this kind of creates the space that I'm kind of creating here. This also now makes sense that actually transcription entry is actually a model that sits at our top level, and these things are kind of nested within as a namespace. And so yeah, I think that makes sense now. So we've got 2 things that we've created so far. We have our flow. This is our user flow that we're going to start trying to build out. This is where we upload a recording, view our transcription, edit it with all of the entries, the utterances and the markers. And also we can view our minutes at the end. We can generate them and view them and see the kind of summary and export the minutes at the back. For the data structure side of things, we're thinking that we'll have a meeting. The meeting will have many recordings, or it has one recording. It'll have many participants, like 1 or more. It'll have many transcription entries, eventually. And it'll have many agenda points. So we'll need to kind of create all of that stuff. Each transcription entry will either be an utterance or a marker. The marker will belong to an agenda point. The transcription utterance will have a speaker, and the speaker will be a participant in the meeting. Initially, when we first run through the transcription service, what we'll get is the transcription entry, the utterance, and the speakers. But what we won't necessarily have is the ability to link. So the things that the user will be doing in our kind of platform will be linking the speakers to participants in the meeting, kind of creating this relationship here. The user is going to be dealing with this relationship, but perhaps we'll just highlight that in a slightly different color of a purple. The other thing they'll be doing is they'll be creating the transcription marker itself, and they will, so they'll be setting this up and they'll be creating those, and that will then help create the agenda point, which inside the agenda point we will be keeping the summary from that session. I've just noticed the lighting is getting to that point in the day where it's not light enough because there's too much light behind me, but that's fine. Cool. Let's see. So I think that makes sense as a bit of a structure there. One of the things that might be nice to do here is just map out what properties these have. So meeting will probably have a name. Let's just see. It's a meeting. We'll have a name. How do I want to structure that? Oh, vanished. Meeting as a name. Let's just grab these. So recording, participants, transcription, entry, agenda point, transcription, marker, transcription, speaker. These are the different things that we have in our domain. In our application, I'm going to create these bold. Let's zoom in as well. Can I already get zoom? Fine. So we have a name. The recording is going to have some sort of like file name potentially. Like, where did we store it? Location. The participants are all going to have names. We don't need to worry about avatars or anything like that. If we have common participants, perhaps at some point we do want to have that actually not assigned to a meeting. And perhaps there should be at some point a way of linking a participant to a user or a person in the platform. And perhaps at that point it wouldn't make sense to have a name under participants. If we thought about this as actually like, perhaps there's this other concept outside of the idea of thing, of people or person. And that person kind of has that kind of relationship between the participants. I don't think we worry about that right now. The transcription entry has this timestamp. Like, we know we need to have that timestamp in there. The agenda point itself has a topic. We know we need to include that in there. The marker actually just holds the relationship. So we already have this relationship. This gives it the timestamp. This gives it the agenda point. There actually isn't anything to add there. Similar for the utterance actually, but we do have the text. Text, is that what I called it up here? Yeah. I guess value probably makes sense here, but I also kind of feel like that's like maybe this is the body of the utterance. What up there? Like what's the body of what they said? Speaker itself, again, probably speaker ID. But I don't know about speaker ID. we know we're creating speaker 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to create those speakers and map them. Perhaps that's kind of contained within that process. Again, I guess this is a bit like the marker. This just creates a relationship between the two things. And so there actually isn't anything there. Nothing. Just the relationship. I guess really what would be in here would be the participant ID. And that's it. And similar to the marker, like what we're keeping in here is going to be the agenda point ID. The utterance is going to have a transcription speaker ID. Let's do all this lowercase actually. The agenda point has a topic. And a meeting ID as well, right? Because it belongs to a meeting. The transcription entry has the timestamp. It also has the meeting ID because it belongs to a meeting. That's it. These two, the markers, actually do have something else. They have the transcription entry ID. Transcription entry ID. The participants have a name, but they also are participant in the meeting ID because they belong to a meeting. The recording, again, belongs to a meeting. That's the meeting ID. The meeting just has a name. File name. Or like, actually, let's call this like URL. The recording. This might be an S3 bucket. It might be a place in active storage. I don't fully know where we're storing the recording yet, but there'll be some sort of recording needed there. Cool. One thing that I might want to do at some point here is have like nested agenda points. It comes up quite often. And so an agenda point might actually belong to itself. And so it might need agenda point ID on itself. So an agenda point might belong to its own agenda point, if that makes sense. And so has many. So an agenda point has many agenda points. And so we've recorded that there as well. Why does that name disappear? Also, participant ID as well. Like, there we go. I don't know what's going on there. Solve that problem. Cool. Fine, so we have our meeting, we've got our recording, our participants, our transcription entry, agenda point, marker. Now, I'm probably not going to build a lot of that soon, but I will start with kind of a meeting, uploading that meeting, adding in the participants, that sort of stuff. And we can do that fairly quickly, I think. Cool. This gives us quite a lot to go on, I think. Cool. I think this is a good place to actually just pause for a moment. I need to take a quick break, I think. So I can pause and then we can, I think what we'll next do is we'll start diving into setting up some of the code base and some of the framework there, making some of the choices. There's a few decisions we'll need to make around setting that up, how we approach testing, how we approach kind of what front-end frameworks we use, what CSS libraries we use, some of that stuff, and setting up some of that boilerplate and framework so we can actually start building out some of these concepts and creating a new meeting and adding the recording in and all of that sort of stuff. So I am going to take a break. I'll run another quick ad break, a short one as well, just so to keep pre-roll off while I'm away. But cool, please stay tuned and I'll be back in a bit. Cheers. BRB. Cool, I am back. Cool. Now, one of the things I was talking about doing was to start actually setting up some of the code. We've got a bit of a direction here around how we want some of this stuff to work in terms of function, and so what we need to do is create a bit of a space to build some of that stuff. So I'm going to be using a library and all called Ruby on Rails, which you can find online here. I already have this all installed, so we're just going to kind of kick off and set that project up. Now, one of the things I'll do is I'll go into iTerminal and set this up. So I'll go to muster minutes. You can see here, kind of got a couple of things. Got the prototype Google Speech Cloud. Let's just, what did I do in that? Just building a little script. We will create a new Rails app, and I have a few things to consider here. So my normal default kind of go-to Rails project would be to use Tailwind CSS. Now, I don't necessarily know Tailwind can be quite controversial in terms of a library choice there. I actually quite like Tailwind for throwing stuff together quite quickly, but I do feel like that it's probably not my favorite approach for like a longer, more stable running project. But actually what I really like doing in CSS world is kind of following this approach called Cube, FYI, is the domain there. So Cube stands for Composition, Utility, Block, and Exception. And so Cube CSS is kind of combining these four ideas with CSS, cascading style sheets. And it makes a really high emphasis on the use of utility classes. But before utility classes, you have what they call composition classes. And this idea is that actually you can create these composable classes that allow you to create composition, layout, the structure and the flow, like flow and rhythm, this class here, creating flow through the page to manage the spacing between items, is done through the flow class rather than creating a whole new, rather than embedding some of this margin top in what you might have as like your card content class. So it really limits the amount of CSS you actually have to write, but actually I think benefits from the stuff that kind of a lot of people that argue against Tailwind tend to argue about. It avoids you having very long class names for lots of utility classes, because when you get to that stage, usually what you're doing is building a very specific component, or in this case what they would call it is a block. and you can encapsulate a lot of that CSS into a block. And they also have this idea around exceptions using kind of data attributes, which lines really well with a lot of the stuff that I do with that we'll be doing with stimulus and some of the JavaScript as we come onto that later. So that's kind of where I'm going to start there. So that's why I'm going to pick Tailwind as kind of the default. When I set that up, in fact, is there a guide on here to go through how those flags work? Through Rails Tailwind. Talks a little about it here on GitHub, so you can add this manually if you've already got it. If you're generating a new application, you can pre-configure a Tailwind with --CSS Tailwind, or you can do this later and add that in. We're starting a new project, so we can just add --Tailwind. So I think what I'm going to do while I'm kind of picking up the flags that I want to use to set up my Rails app, I'm going to just kind of record them somewhere. Again, let's just use over here. We'll create, oh my god, that's a huge. So we know we want --CSS Tailwind. That means we'll have this Tailwind CSS library pre-installed and configured. It'll allow us to do our styling through Tailwind and set that up. The next thing that I want to do is choose how we're going to do our JS. If I go back to Ruby Tailwind, Rails Tailwind, the other thing that will be in here is, so we've got CSS bundling, JS bundling is the other kind of option. Now, I need to decide whether I want to use a JS bundler or not. Go build or no build is one of those decisions in the project. Do we build our front end code, or do we just kind of let it be what it is? Using import maps, and I actually really like import maps. But this is a big decision at the front of the project because I don't actually know how much I'm going to need to do this stuff. So really what I'm looking for here is, can I do this stuff later? And it looks like I can. So if I wanted to set this up now, I could do JS, or just J apparently, and then specify bundler, bun, esbuild, roll up a webpack. And or if I'm doing this later, I can just run this bundle add JS bundling and then run the JavaScript install command. And so I think what I'm going to do for now is perhaps try and avoid doing any JS bundling and actually focus on import maps, which is a better approach, I think, to avoid having like forcing. I kind of want to put forcing functions in the way of me writing too much JavaScript. I want to do JavaScript for sprinkles and make it like more interactive, but I don't want to use JavaScript as a crutch for building out a lot of the interface. And so running ES Rails 7, yeah. And actually it looks like the default is just to yeah, it's automatically included in 7 Plus for new application, so I don't have to worry about any kind of flags or anything. The next flag that I tend to run, and I'm seeing it here when I'm seeing the kind of log, is like -d Postgres. -d PostgreSQL. And actually that's the database, and I do want to use the database as Postgres because I don't want to have to come back and modify that later. It's just easier if I start with Postgres. I know that I'm going to be hosting it in a Postgres database. I already have some of the hosting set up, which we'll come on to when we get to that stage. But I just know I need to add that flag. So that's something we'll add in there. The other flag that I'm debating adding in here is actually -t. Now the -t flag disables tests, and the reason for disabling the test generation there is actually I might want to use RSpec. And this application template is something that I need to find actually. So I'm going to have to bring up a separate window and just check to see where I put that stuff. Where did it go? So the idea here is that I potentially want to use RSpec. And let's create a new ChatGPT window. Cool, was there an ad just then? I struggle to really follow with the ads. So RSpec or mini test for a Rails app. And actually one of the things that it will do now is ask some questions, because actually I have in my ChatGPT, I've configured this is based off some stuff I saw from Jason Sweat actually, who had this suggestion. Custom instructions, you can add a custom instruction that gets injected in. You can define how you'd like ChatGPT to respond. And I actually took this straight from one of his streams that he did, or one of his like meetups. And you can ask it to ask you questions to get you better information, better output. And so one of the things it just tried to do then, which I didn't let it because I left the page, was ask me some follow-up questions about, okay, why am I asking about RSpec or mini test? And so it's going to kind of go through that and give me some questions. In this case, actually, it's just gone straight for it and kind of isn't asking, but sometimes it asks. Mini test is the default, so if I don't do anything, I'm getting mini test. I do quite like RSpec. I've been playing around with RSpec. I'm not too familiar with either of these languages, either of these two testing frameworks. And so I've been spending a bit of time with each, and I think I'm favouring RSpec at the moment. It's not the one that comes with it by default, but it's the one that tends to be in a lot more production applications, I find. And so I'm thinking I'll probably lean towards using RSpec for the kind of development of this project. And in order to do that, it requires adding some stuff in. So the -T will disable the test generation, because the default test generation will be mini test, and I don't want to use that. The other thing that I've got in here is this -M, and the idea here is to create some sort of template for the project before it spins up. And what I want to try and do is just find where I put the, and perhaps I deleted it. And perhaps I can find it in here. No. Fine. Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to grab that from books. And yeah, so before we create this, let's just jump into some code. I want to create this application template .rb file that's going to use for initializing our project. And one of the things in here that I'll want is to grab this code here from a book that I recently, there you go, you can see excerpt from the Complete Guide to Rails Testing by Jason Sweat. And that's where I'm taking this from. Code, and then after bundle do, and then we're going to generate our spec install. And so, yeah, what this essentially does is when we spin up our Rails app, we're going to get it to add in a bunch of gems. So RSpec Rails, that's the kind of library, the gem that connects Rails and RSpec together. FactoryBot Rails is a tool for generating new instances of our models and stuff that we're testing. Capybara is a tool for dealing with Selenium, I think, is the thing there. WebDrivers is a tool for actually interacting with Selenium, and Faker is there as well. We'll use these tools as we kind of go through the process. But yeah, so Capybara is a tool for interacting with Selenium by simulating clicks and keystrokes. And then the WebDrivers is actually doing the driving of the Chrome browser. So what this is going to allow us to do is write some tests that actually allow us to control a web browser, and it's going to make clicks, and we're going to be able to make assertions to check that stuff's actually happening on that page. And then Faker is going to be a tool for generating fake information. So if we need to create a person's name or a paragraph or something they said, we can create these as like fake things. The other bit that we have in here is we're going to initialize a generators.rb file, and this is going to inject this code into that file. So this web Rails application config generators, and what this is going to do is it's just going to configure RSpec for us. We're going to turn off fixtures because we're not really going to use them. View specs, helper specs, routing specs, request specs, controller specs. We're going to turn all of those off. And the reason for that is actually because I want to focus a little bit more on, there's kind of two main types of tests that I want to be able to do. One of them is system tests, and that's controlling a browser to do the big flow operation. So we might think about that as actually testing the navigation through this flow and doing certain things on that flow. The other thing that I wanted to is test models. So all of these things down here, each one of these cards, I suppose, these post-it notes, are models in our application, and I want to write code that is able to test each one of those models. So I might want to test that. I'm not sure yet around how, like, what tests I'm going to write. I wouldn't necessarily want to test the relationships, but perhaps I might want to test, for example, that when I add a speaker to a participant, that the transcription utterance can get to that participant or something like that. It's a contrived example, but I think as we build this out, we'll start to see places where those tests might make sense. The other tests I find not that useful. I don't tend to, like, most of my code is going to be in the models. Most of my code is going to exist within these or things that are supporting these. And those things that are supporting those will also be models. So I'll avoid most of those. And then after bundle, so once we've bundled our application, it's then going to tell it it's going to generate the RSpec install command, and that's going to install RSpec. And cool. So in the end, our command is probably going to look a little bit like this. We're probably going to do -t, capital T, and CSS with Tailwind, database with Postgres, and then we'll do the application template, and we'll grab this in there as well. And we might as well just start that now. We'll do new Rails new. We'll call it muster minutes -app, and disable tests. We use Tailwind as our CSS library of choice. We're going to use Postgres as our database adapter, and we're going to use our application template to finish an install setup of RSpec Rails. And that's going to get us a Rails application that we can start building and actually write some code with and see the stuff that's going on in there. Let's go with that. You can see it's going to do a bunch of stuff now, and it's created that code. I'm going to close that while this is doing this, and we're going to load up into the right directory once that's all set up. Cool. So that's done a bunch of stuff. What that command would have done is create the muster minutes app directory, which we'll just go into now. It's created a bunch of files in here. This is a bunch of code that we didn't have. This is all green, which means it's not committed yet. I have some light bouncing off on my screen, so I'll just change that. There we go. Cool. Of course, we've got all of these files, and the other thing that we can now do as well, like it should have said actually, it probably did say, it says bin/dev to start foreman. So we will do that. And that will spin up our application. You'll see here listening on. We can click that and we should see our Rails app. Now it tells us that we haven't created our muster minutes app development database. We can get it to create that for us. And now we are in our Rails app, which we have set up. Now there's a few things that we want to be able to do here at this point. Let's just check what we've got going on. We've got our Rails helper, our spec helper. So this is all of our RSpec stuff that we've set up. We have our app. Now, before we jump into doing too much, we like to commit. Now we're using Git as our version control. So I'm just going to set that up. Haven't tracked any of the files yet. That's fine. Git commit. And what we're going to write here is a little message just to say that this is our initial commit. Initialize project with Rails or Ruby on Rails. And we need to add everything as well. Then we can commit that stuff. So now you'll notice when we go back into our code editor, all of these have gone from green to white. And that just means that actually there are no changes. We are at the latest version there in our code. Now we have this Rails holding app page. Don't particularly want that for too long. Perhaps one thing we could do is just grab the muster minutes coming soon page and deal with that as our holding page for now, perhaps. Rather than this Rails app file version. So let's do that. Let's see if we can. That will get us into doing some code before we start writing too much. So we'll bring up another terminal, this time in VS Code, and we can do Rails generate. And really what we want to do here is just a controller for this kind of main screen. We're going to generate a controller. It's like welcome, maybe the welcome controller, and it's only going to have an index. That's all it's going to have. Or even just a show. So let's just generate that. You can see here it's created welcome helper. It's got our show partial. We can open that code in our file. We've got the welcome controller there. We also want to look at the roots config. So one of the things that's done is this get there. What I'm actually going to do is just do welcome/show there. So that's going to replace our default. Now when we reload this, what we get actually is there's no root. And that's because this shouldn't have been /, it should have been hash. Cool. Now we get this welcome #show. If we go into our show, you'll see that there's some Tailwind CSS going on in here. I don't want to use that right now. We'll come on to some of the CSS stuff probably shortly. I think that'll be the next thing that we tackle in the next hour. I think what I want to try and do is get to the point where we have the code, a kind of boilerplate all set up mostly, for the most part. So we've got a couple of things going on here. So we've got we're using interfont. I'm going to get rid of the interfont. I'm going to swap that out at some point. I want to kind of strip away some of the boilerplate it's giving me. So we're just going to have a body. It's going to yield. We're just going to call it muster minutes. the title. The other stuff is all okay. And so it becomes very basic now. Now, let's see, we know we've got a bunch of stuff in here, like icons and stuff. One of the things that we want to do is probably put the fav icon in place. And so there is a bunch of files here that are just really just icons and characters and stuff like that. I'm going to drag that all into the public folder. I'm going to replace what's there and install all of that. Now, if you see at the top left at the moment, you've got the little Rails icon. If I Command Shift R, you get the muster minutes fav icon. That's that. So that's all of these. We've just added the fav icon. You can see the image there. There's a larger version of it, smaller version of it, tile for Microsoft, a version, SVG for Safari. There's all sorts of stuff in there that I've pre-generated those assets. They're all in the public folder. They all sit there. The next bit that's in here is this index HTML. Let's just take a look at that. And this was really crudely thrown together. Character is something that I threw into here as well, right? But actually the character is actually more of an asset. And so we're going to move that character into the images folder. Because what we want to do in our show is create the image tag. I think it's like that, and then it will be /character, or just, is it character.png? There's our image. He's quite large. So we'll just create a width of 25. Can I do 25% as a thing there like that? Yeah. And how did we have it before in this index HTML? There was no image, but it was controlled by the CSS actually. So let's just grab these, and we can perhaps create the same page but built into our Rails app. I kind of don't want to approach the CSS in this way right here, right now, so perhaps we'll come on to that next. I'm going to continue using manrope, I think. And I think the easiest way I do that is just to add these straight into our application up here. And so if I refresh, that's not going to do anything because I've not told it to do anything with that. That starts to touch into some of the CSS, and I think for that I don't want to just create a file here. Let's just take a look to see what it created for us in our style sheets. We have an application.tailwind and we've got an application.css. Now I think I want to create stuff in the Tailwind CSS file. Let's just do body for now. And then do font, family, manrope, serif. Now did that use manrope? Go on computed, I'm going to see font family. See down there manrope is applying, which means that manrope as CSS is taking effect there. I guess for now I could just take these things, it's not too much CSS. And so we'll copy that CSS into our file here, we'll reload, and we kind of have, for the most part, what we're aiming for. And we have our welcome controller. It doesn't do any logic, there's no code really going on there. it just creates a place to render the welcome show layout, which is just this div with the H1, tells you it's coming soon, the image tag. I don't need the width here anymore because actually the width is handled by our styling. And if we switch back, then the other thing that we've done is added in public. So we can actually check. One of the nice things about Git is we have all of this in here. Here's all of the changes we've made. We added our character. We modified our application.tailwind.css file. We've added a welcome controller, added the welcome helper. Now I'm probably going to just discard the changes on that welcome helper, which means we're deleting the file. I'm not using the welcome helper. If I need a welcome helper, I'll create one. I don't want to create loads of files that are unnecessary. I probably never need a welcome helper module in my application. You can see here we changed the application HTML layout. We changed the title, we added in our manrope font, we got rid of the main tag that was surrounding our kind of content. We added our show page. We updated our root so that the root of the Rails app is this welcome controller's show action. We added a bunch of images and browser config and favicons and site manifest. Now that's a good place to just kind of check in. So let's just add all of that stuff. What we'll do is we will add favicon and basics welcome. Add basic welcome holding page with favicon. I think that makes sense. That's what we've done. We can commit that. Okay, cool. Now once we've done that, the next step is really I want to deal with the CSS. And what I really want to do is there should be in here like a config tailwind config.js file. Now again, we're not using inter, we're going to use manrope. So we can just change that there and that becomes the default. That's how we're extending tailwind. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, cube CSS in here, I think resources. Cube CSS has a bunch of ideas in here, and I could write all of these utility classes manually, or I could get Tailwind to generate them for me. And that's kind of the idea that's exposed in buildexcellentwebsites.es. Website.es. Andy Bell is the person who kind of mostly wrote, I believe, the ideas behind Cube CSS, and actually built this website as well as part of a talk that he did at a conference in 2022. And this website actually kind of makes a good use of all of these tools that it mentions: Cube CSS, Utopia, Every Layout, Design Tokens, Polypane, Tailwind, all of this stuff. And it uses Tailwind as its utility class generator. And that's kind of how I want to use Tailwind for this project. I want to use it as this kind of utility first utility generator. But I'm mixing it in with these ideas that I'm exploring with Cube CSS. We'll also look at Utopia. Utopia is a way of kind of creating viewport sizes that scale. That creates a really nice effect, especially for doing mobile screens. As you kind of shrink down, the type and the kind of space shrinks to make use. So if you look at the gaps between these columns here, 1, 2, and 3, you see they're kind of moderately spaced on desktop when you're at the largest size. But actually, as you shrink down, those spaces really get thinner. And actually, the space between 1 and 2 now is perhaps maybe 10 pixels, whereas before they were probably maybe 20. If I click show space, you can kind of see the orange space in general just gets smaller as you kind of adjust that. So that's the idea behind Utopia. There's a set of calculators for kind of adjusting type space sizing, and you set a min and a max, and we can use this tool later. But that's one of the things that kind of is in here. Yeah, design tokens is a fairly common idea around tokenizing your system. Every layout is a really nice and useful website and utility for grabbing a bunch of kind of composition style classes. So when we talk about Cube CSS, really what we're thinking about most of the time is this mindset. But actually, when it comes to the tools, we can use the stuff in every layout for our composition, the stuff in Tailwind for our utility, and then the blocks is really where we start building stuff ourselves. But with the composition utility classes, we actually get 80% of the way. With very little CSS, very little fighting against kind of rules and stuff like that. So that will be what I want to aim to get in, I think. This website actually has a open source version. It's kind of in Glitch, which is a separate tool. But in here we can see how their config for Tailwind looks very different. They have some different tools going on in here, and some different plugins and some different stuff. And I kind of want to emulate some of these ideas so that I can use them in muster minutes. And yeah, so if we look in source and then look at the CSS, you'll see that actually there's a global CSS. It imports the Tailwind base and the components and the utilities. But between that is also this idea of kind of these other imports as well for reset.css and fonts.css. The first thing that I want to do probably is actually change the reset. So when we talk about CSS resets, one of the things you'll notice here in the, let's bring the development one to the front, you'll notice this H1, we've not given it any styling, we've not given it any CSS, and so in Tailwind, our H1, we now have to go in and manually give it a bunch of styles and define a bunch of styles there, because it stripped all of its styling away, and I actually don't particularly like that. And so Andy Bell also has a reset CSS. It's a modern CSS reset. I think he actually updated this now, literally kind of a couple of months ago. And so he has this reset CSS script here, which this post breaks it all down, but I'm just going to kind of copy paste it and take it from here. Now, it's worth reading through this and getting a feel for whether all of these rules necessarily apply for yourself. I think he says something in here that actually you probably don't need this, and you probably because browsers do a pretty good job at the moment anyway, and you probably want to set your own rules as well around how you approach this. But I've gone through this a few times, and I know that actually a lot of the stuff in here makes sense for my applications, and if there isn't something, I can take it out if I need to. So we're going to take that. We are going to go into our style sheets. We're going to probably create that reset.css here, and we're going to copy and paste it in. Now, if we went ahead and quickly close all of these, so we're going to have a reset CSS, application Tailwind, and application Tailwind config.js. Now, he's got his under like global reset, and I think I'm probably going to keep the similar folder structure there. So let's just call this global, and then do reset CSS in there. Now, our application Tailwind CSS. For our global file, insert the base, then import global. So we're going to do that. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to do the Tailwind base, and then we're going to import our global reset. And hopefully this works. We'll see how this works out. I'm sure I'm going to run into a problem at some point. I can't remember how I solved it around the way that these files are imported. So, but we'll see where we get to. So I've imported this reset. If I go to muster minutes and refresh, you'll see it's still not quite solved anything. I would like to see what the CSS looks like. It does look like we're getting our reset CSS. Didn't expect it to come through quite like that. Is that... Did I add something in the... Assets global reset? That is what it is. So I didn't realize we were just going to import stuff like that. Okay. Let's see. Fine. So, but you'll notice it hasn't solved the problem. We're still resetting stuff, and that's because there is a config file setting in the Tailwind config that we use to turn that off. And it's this core plugins Tailwind reset. And it sits alongside presets and content and stuff like that. So we'll go into our Tailwind config and we will content. We've got plugins down here, so maybe we just set it in just before plugins. Core plugins pre-flight false, and that disables Tailwind's reset. Now I don't know if this is going to take effect straight away. It has. That's nice. And that just makes it a little bit easier. So now we can modify these H1s and H2s and provide a good base. And that's really a core part of Cube CSS, is really using the cascade of CSS and making use of that. Cool. So that's the first step. We've kind of got our reset in there. The next thing to do is to step back a little bit. Let's just take a look actually at what's going on in here with this file. So with his config, and here's the actual core of the config, this is what's actually getting exported. So everything else before is kind of setting stuff up. So we're going to ignore that for a second. We're going to start here. Content, we don't need to do that. Like, our content is set up how we need our content. Presets, again, it's empty. Ours, I don't think we're even defining presets. We don't need to worry about that. The theme that's defined here sets a bunch of settings and config. And yeah, you'll notice here that there's kind of colors, spacing, font size, font families, font weights, background colors, text colors. All of these things are coming from these variables up here, and these are generating the Tailwind tokens with a little utility, CSS utility, JavaScript file. And it's building them up from these design token files, which are just JSON files with that information in. Now, this is the one thing I kind of wish this system, like, it would be better, I think, if you could configure Tailwind through CSS, perhaps to some degree. Because I'd like not to define all of these tokens in JSON, but I think it's not the end of the world. So let's take a look at what they look like. So they just look like this. An array of these different colors. The value and the name. The fonts, very similar. Have a bunch of font names and values and descriptions. Spacing is the interesting one, where actually the JSON stuff becomes more useful, because this is used with Utopia to calculate the kind of spacing. Same with the text sizes, and same the viewport is the main controller of those things. Now if I just go back to the Tailwind config, and that injects into background color, text color, some of the spacing for the margins as well, adding equally. The other bit here as well is just this variant order. I've not found the need to do that right now. And then he has a plugin as well. So they have a plugin. They have two plugins. One of them generates custom property values from Tailwind config. So actually this creates the I think this one actually creates the variables that you can use. So they define the values for all of those variables, I think. And then this one actually generates a couple of extra custom utility classes. Yeah, that's it. So this one allows you to create like variables, you can use them in your blocks, and then this one, and that will add it to the root, and we can see what that looks like, I think. So really the core of what we're doing here in all of this stuff is creating a way to use design tokens with our Tailwind config and defining our kind of configuration in these JSON files around what color should look like and stuff like that. Now let's just take a quick look at how some of that works out. Design tokens, colors. Okay, so we know we'll probably have this kind of brand color blue that we've got as this background, and you can create a set of tokens for that blue that create us a kind of color scale. I think the tokens are a core part of this. Where do I want to store the tokens is probably a key part of this. Let's just create a file here. Tokens. See, I wonder, like, tokens probably is a bit confusing here. Design tokens. The other option is to do it in here in the style sheets folder. How did they... So he's done it in a completely different kind of structure. He's not using Rails, he's not using Ruby. He created a design tokens folder. And I think that might make sense in config. So we'd have like app, like just master minutes dash app slash config slash design tokens slash colors.json or something like that. Design tokens slash colors. And then I'm not going to use these colors, but I'm going to copy and paste this file. Now, something that I'm not sure about is like those colors are just those colors, right? But I actually probably will want more colors than just that one scale. Colors he's got in there at the moment is like dark, light, light glare, primary. And I do tend to prefer the 100 to like 900 scale when it comes to some of that stuff. And actually I'm doing this approach in another project that I'm just going to take a quick peek at. And it's none of those projects, that's annoying. Let's just development, Benland, Statamic. Let's just take a quick peek at this project. So what did I do here? Resources, design tokens, and this is the structure that I got for that file. And actually that's more like what I want to do here. I don't really care for the title and description and this structure here. I actually prefer this approach. And I think what I'm going to do is just perhaps cut out all of the others for now. We're going to have blue. I think that's fine. Like for now, we'll add more colors in here at some point. Perhaps we'll even use this blue for now. It's the wrong blue, but I'll update that color scale. The idea here is that these numbers represent a color scale, and we're going to create that color scale with a tool called UIcolors.app. In fact, I think this is the one based on the muster minutes blue that I've got anyway. So these will be the color codes for 50 all the way to 950. Can I export that? And yeah, blue chill. and then Tailwind Hex. That kind of is how I want to structure it, I suppose. Not entirely, but fortunately VS Code solves that for me. So that will be the blue chill, is kind of the word they gave it, but or chill blue. And that will be the color code that I use. So that's a good basis to start, because I want to use those colors in some of my CSS. Perhaps the blue chill 500 or something like that, or text color can perhaps be a blue chill 950 for a really dark kind of navy tealy green. Cool. So we've got our colors in there. Now let's just take a quick look at what he was doing in here. And we're just gonna perhaps align some of our stuff going on here. So he imports his color tokens like that. So we just do const color tokens equals require. Now our tokens aren't there. They are just in design tokens colors.json. And hopefully that works in relation to this file. Now he has tokens to Tailwind. Now I obviously have a version of this that's a slightly different file structure. Do we have our CSS util? So what did I do in Tailwind config? So I've got colors. I just require them straight and import them straight in. And that's because actually they are already in the right format for Tailwind. So I've got my colors. I don't need to do anything to turn them into tokens. They already are in the tokens format. And I can take those colors and stick them straight into the theme. Like that. And what I would like to do is grab this plugin as well that I wrote as part of that code and add that in. Now, I don't want to do the space or the font size just yet. I just want the colors. And so we're going to take the current config, we're going to loop through each of the groups, and then we're going to be able to do that as a CSS variable that's just in there, and it adds it into there. So let's see, what have we got right now? We go to muster minutes. Nothing's really broken, it's all fine. What I want to do is change the application Tailwind CSS. We've got this background. I'm going to change this to a var -- color chill blue 500. Now I don't know if that's the right color. Actually, it looks like it's not even applying these the CSS yet anyway. Now there could be a few reasons for that. Maybe I didn't call it chill blue. I did call it chill blue, so that should be fine. Perhaps I could check to see whether that is being used. So the other thing that you should be able to do as well is if I went into application.html.erb, I should be able to go in here and also just do class bg chill blue 500. Like that should also be something that I can do. That class doesn't seem to apply. Okay. Now the next thing that I'm thinking is maybe look, here we are. We're getting errors in this log here. Cannot find module Tailwind CSS / default theme. And so that's part of here. Tailwind CSS default theme, and that's this. Now that's not even a new thing. Now, do I even need to get the default theme? I'm using the default theme here to set the font family up. I kind of don't want to extend, and I guess part of this default theme is just that let's just do font family sans, and then we can just see, that's again the same thing there. I don't want to have to grab that default family. Am I doing it in here? No. I'm going to ditch the default for a moment, I think is the plan. Man rope is going to be our font, otherwise sans serif or system UI, something like that. And that means I can comment that line out for now. Plugin is not defined. Okay. Well, okay. This starts to make more sense. I haven't actually required the plugin stuff, so let's just grab that. Load this back up. Post CSS JS is not defined. No, I've not got that. That's true as well. Sorry for the jumping around a bit here. This is where this might not work quite as well. I don't have... We are using... the standalone Tailwind executable, which bundles in Node and a set of packages. But that does mean that some things like the Tailwind CSS plugin, and especially the Post CSS JS, probably aren't going to work as well. I'm just laying this out so I don't have to keep switching back too much. We can see what's going on a bit. And so we might need to install Node or have some sort of JavaScript actually running with Node modules and do all of that stuff, which starts to lean itself more towards having JS bundling, like we talked about earlier. Because otherwise, Tailwind CSS executable the standalone CLI build does not. It comes pre-installed with some stuff, but it doesn't come. It comes with their first-party plugins, but it's not going to come with Post CSS and stuff like that. And I'm using Post CSS to objectify the post parse this CSS down here, and perhaps I could do a version of this that doesn't require those libraries, but it probably is easier if I can just use those libraries. So I think let's accept that we're going to have to probably manually install some of these. And so we probably need a package.json. We need to create that stuff. I don't want to go down the whole JS bundling just yet, but I do need to install these and have them available. bin/dev actually just runs the prop file. And the prop file has this, and it's calling for the CSS it does bin/rails tailwind css : watch, and that's what's triggering the CSS to run. If I go all the way to when I first started running the app, did it tell me what command it ran? It just said rebuilding, didn't it? It started and rebuilding. But one thing I could do is perhaps just do npm init custom init app version 1. Don't really care. Don't really care. Don't really care. Don't really care. Josh Brown. Unlicensed. If I could spell unlicensed right, and it would help. That's fine. I don't really care for any of that stuff. npm I -- save dev tailwind css post css. Now we've got to figure out what plugins and stuff we've got to install. Post css -js. And I think that's it for now. Like, there's also these things down here. I will need to install those. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to know is, like, okay, like this proc file runs bin Rails tailwind CSS watch. Rails tailwind CSS. What does that do? And how does that work? Wraps the standard executable version. Do they have using if you're not able to use the vended version, for example, from an unsupported platform, you can use a local installation. Would that allow me to So one of the things I'm wondering about here actually is, like, do they offer some configuration for using like third-party plugins or being able to write our own? It will create my Tailwind file. It creates the Tailwind input file there. That's where you import set your custom apply rules, run, it uses that to generate assets, builds, Tailwind. And then that will be included in the app. When you're opening your application, you might want to run it in watch mode. Yeah, that's what I generally do. So what I want to be able to do here really is to potentially just, I don't want to be able to use my own installation of Tailwind, but it's not actually my own installation of Tailwind, because actually what I'm doing is I want to use Node as its whole platform. And so I go in the docs, Tailwind CLI, you install it, you call npx Tailwind CSS, and then that's the config command. And so really what I'm doing here is, this is what it was. I'm going to change it with npx Tailwind CSS -i is going to be app assets style sheets application.tailwind.css, and then the output is going to be app assets builds Tailwind.css. We're going to call it watch. And so if we Control C, we'll clear what we've got, and we'll we'll run none of those. We'll run bin/dev again. No utility classes were detected. There aren't. And then it says done. And so perhaps now if I refresh, we're back to not really having a... We've even lost our H1 here. Which is interesting. If I... So this is what it's generating. And it has generated some of this stuff. But obviously the reset.css hasn't imported like it did before. Perhaps that has to be a /. And actually, like by default, it should be turning off this. So it feels like actually what's happening is this config file isn't used anymore, and that's probably because I need to pass the config file to it in some way. We're telling it to watch, but obviously we're not using our config file, and so what we need to be able to do is we're using the Tailwind CSS, using preprocessors. We're not doing any of that. Let's just see. Let's open up a new tab. We'll do npx, or we'll go to our master minutes app. iPhone cable get away. npx Tailwind CSS help. So we can do -i and -o, which we've done. We've got -w, which is the watch. We can do -c to pass a config, and I think we will need to, because I think the config is in a different place. We'll make that -w, and then we'll also do -c for the config. I think it's -c. Yeah. And the config is at config/tailwind css.config, or just tailwind.config.js. And let's just see how that goes. So that spun up a bit differently that time. Let's see what it does. So you can see that now we've got our kind of color coming through. It's obviously not the right color in terms of the thing, but you can see that I guess we've got two things going on. So this could be you can see our utility class here, BG Chill Blue 500 is working, so we can do it that way. Now, obviously we don't necessarily want to do utility class there. If we're following Cube, we can take that off. We refresh, you'll notice we've lost the class, but we're still this blue color, this greeny. It's more of a green at this point. UI colors.app. I went to here. Perhaps that was just a random color. What I'll like to do then, since that was just a random color, is grab this color here and pass that into there. We will export, we will porcelain. Actually, I kind of like that as the color name, you know. And we'll grab that, we'll find our colors file, and we will paste that in. And then we will go. Now, if I refresh, I think it's going to go, we don't have a blue defined. We've annihilated all of the colors in Tailwind. So we're actually only going to generate these if they're used first, and then if they're defined here. But they are defined in the root. You can see down here, all of these colors are defined here. The one that we just said was, I think, the 100. We can check on UI colors to see what it selected as. it's 100. And so porcelain 100 is the color I want to use, and I'm going to use it here as our background. And that then sets that up. Equally, we might want to say that actually the text color is var color porcelain 950. And that'll help keep it in the same kind of color tone. We could even tone it down a bit if we want to reduce the contrast between it. I might want to check the color contrast on that. So one of the things it does here is a contrast grid. I want to show all of the AA. So I'm using the 100. And so white 100, there isn't sufficient contrast until you get to like 600. 800 looks like it works quite nicely. 900 might be better. If I do AAA, 800 still passes actually. So yeah, and the idea here is if I have the 100 text, or if I have the text as 800, it can go on a actually what's going on, the background is this color, right? The background is 100 and the text is like 900, 800. So 800 is the lowest we can get to get AAA rating there on accessibility. So we'll go for that. It makes it feel like it's more of the same tone. I think what I would like to do as well is perhaps bring in a bit of a brighter blue as well in a few places. So perhaps what we can do is just pick something from here and create another pack. Have these two blues. I don't know, like Pelorus. Not save, export. And what we can simply do at this point is we already have our design tokens file. We can just go down here, comma, paste. Pelorus is now in there as well. So if we really wanted to, and this is where this idea of cube CSS comes in quite nicely, because we're doing a lot of this stuff via our actual CSS that we've written. We're kind of creating some baseline styles. But actually, let's say we want this coming soon to actually be a little bit more of a pop and have it this Pelorus color. We can go to our show partial and we can just add our class in here and just do text Pelorus 500. And I probably spelt Pelorus wrong because that's a very odd Pelorus. Got an O and a U in there. I put Polo Pelorus. And you can see that kind of pop of color coming through there now. And so we might want to do that. That might not be the right thing. Perhaps it's too light actually. Perhaps we just want it to be a bit of a darker color. We know that we're in the 800 band. Let's go 800. Perhaps that makes more sense. Perhaps 700. Maybe we want it to be a bit brighter. Perhaps that works out quite nicely. Might need to be concerned about contrast there, but the color hue is also different, so it might help. And it makes more sense here as just a utility class than it would by writing like some complex CSS. And so really being able to leverage the benefit of Tailwind and also writing kind of blocks and stuff as well, I found it really powerful. What we'll do now is actually, I kind of want to bring that pop of color to this heading. Like, I don't know why I'm spending time on this because this isn't really that relevant, but let's just copy and paste that over. Put that in. There we go. Muster minutes coming soon. Turn your meeting recordings into helpful meeting minutes with the help of Muster minutes. I'm quite happy with that progress so far. Let's see what we've done, because it says we've added 1,000 lines of code. Now, we obviously haven't added 1,000 lines of code. What we need to do is go to our git ignore file and add in the node modules folder. Ignore storage, public assets. Okay, that's fine. And so ignore package node modules. Pages? I don't know. We have a node underscore modules folder now. And see, that instantly clears that up. So we haven't done 1,000 lines of code. Apparently we've done 1,642 changes though. That also feels quite excessive. What did we do? We added the node modules folder to our gignor. We now have a package lock file that's generally always a few thousand lines long. Kind of annoying. We have our package JSON file which has our dev dependencies on it for our Tailwind stuff. Fine. We kind of begrudgingly added that into our application. Our proc file we updated. We can't use the bin rails command anymore. We kind of have to use the npx Tailwind CSS to run Tailwind so we get access to that JavaScript ecosystem. We updated our application Tailwind CSS. We had to add this dot in the front of here. Actually, we didn't need to do that, right? I don't think that's actually something we needed to do. Is that... Because actually it wasn't that was the problem. Now, the bit that's weird here is it's telling me that we've added the spacing. Oh, we did. We've not done this. We've not committed that yet. I've replaced the colors here with those. I think I can get rid of the font family now as well, because I think... Okay, that's still... We're not ready for that stage yet. We'll get there. And... Yeah, we're going to tidy up some of this other stuff. We've got some base CSS in here as well that probably doesn't live in here. We need to move it out. Yeah. So we've got that. Reset CSS, we added our reset. We've got our show, which we added in a couple of these utility classes to make it pop a little bit. Our Tailwind config that we've updated to include a few things. Perhaps what I can do here is perhaps fix up how the fonts are being applied right now, because they still don't work. If I revert this change, is it just that line? Revert this change. I don't want to do that because I don't want to start messing around with that file too much in this view because it's a bit confusing. I do want to open that file, and perhaps we just spend some time here just to... What did we have before? We had like extend, font, family. And then it was like sans. It wasn't that. Well, let's get default theme back in. We know we're changing this themes there. Can I now get rid of this? No. Because it doesn't set the default style on the font family. So actually, we're not even going to bother with that. I think we're going to strip that out because we're going to come back and we're going to kill out the... We're going to put our fonts in there anyway. That's something. Cool. Happy with that so far. The other bit that we had in the original, like, again, kind of taken from this idea, we have the font size and spacing and also the font family. And these do require these kind of clamp generator utilities and the tokens, Tailwind CSS utilities. I think let's perhaps grab the font family next so that I can get the defaults in there. I think that probably makes sense. Now, how did I do fonts? It's just like this. And I've just got a base font. Like I don't need different fonts there too heavily. Fonts.json. We don't need a display font. We've just got our base. We're going to call it manrope. And we're going to come out there. We do have, if I go back to this Tailwind CSS, there's a CSS utils file that takes these tokens and converts them into Tailwind. I need to use here because I'm going to take the fonts, our design tokens file, and then I'm going to convert those tokens into Tailwind tokens or a Tailwind config. And so let's just find a good place to put that. Lib might make sense, like lib/CSS utils. We already have assets and tasks in there. So like, yeah, let's just do CSS-utils. I feel like underscore is used quite a lot here rather than hyphen, but this is only used for JavaScript, so let's just that's probably another thing. Like I want the file structure to be relatively consistent, but we've got our CSS util file, and then we're going to create like what was this file going to be called? Tokens to Tailwind. Tokens to Tailwind.js. Paste that in there, and then we can require this. As a library dependency, this is actually going to be /lib/CSS utils. Master minutes app lib CSS utils token Tailwind is Tailwind. Well, then also grab font tokens. Design token fonts. Now again, like these kind of come in at separate stages because they're just kind of handled differently. Font family can come in here. And now we have font family, we can just stick font family in there. The other bit that we might want to do at this stage is bring back font family down here. Just call it font. And so now at this stage, if we refresh, obviously we've still got our application. Tailwind CSS doing a bunch of stuff here with our font family. I'm just gonna comment out for a second, see what we get to. Actually, that's probably a bit confusing. So let's open that file. I'm editing it through that. So commented out manrope sans serif font. If I refresh, you'll notice it's just using that as the default now. And that, I guess, comes, where's that coming from? Where is that? I mean, it says it's using manrope, but it's in the body there. Oh, have I not? Let's save that. Ensure it's gone. I'm going to delete it because I don't want it here, basically. Now it says it's there. And that's inheriting it from the body, so maybe there's something going on in our file here. Cannot find the module Sluggify. Ah, there we go. npm I save dev. We need to install Sluggify. And we'll quit and reload that and see if it builds. Ah, there we go. That's what I expected. So now it's building it. there's no font there. But what we can do in here is when we go font family, we do var font base. And that should come through. If it doesn't, let's take a look and see what I did in here. It might be a different way of configuring it. Let's just see. CSS, site, global, styles. Interestingly, actually, I didn't use it there. I just set the font family directly. That's fine. Let's see what we've actually got in root. We've got font base 0 and font base 1. So that doesn't really line up with what we want that to do. And that makes sense as to why it's doing that. But actually, it's kind of, I guess, pointless in the way that that's configured. So I don't actually want to set the font like that. But what it is still useful for is actually I can like use that to apply. So something that should work is if I go to application HTML, I should be able to go class equals font base, and that applies to font. And that is useful because I might have different font families at some point. But I don't really want to have that as the default. When I set that font base, what is Tailwind actually doing there? It's just setting that as the font. Fine. Okay. I want to try and wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. Coming on up to 3 hours now of doing some of this stuff, and I think we've made some good progress. I'll do a bit of a recap in a second, but I just want to, perhaps I want to get to the point where we can commit this, so we have a nice kind of spot to move on from. And I think for that to happen, like we've got this tokens Tailwind, we've set all of this up, but actually the easiest thing here is going to be just to do manrope sans serif, because I think really what this does is it takes the tokens and turns them into Tailwind variables. That token to Tailwind is fine actually. That allows us to use our design tokens file in our config. Does it make more sense though, perhaps, to have, for this situation, something that works a bit more like the colors, where we're just defining, okay, base is this, and it's manrope and sans serif. I don't know. I think it's probably a question for next time. I think probably pick it up tomorrow. I should have a bit longer tomorrow. Let's do a quick recap again. We had git ignore, we had a JSON, file updated, package application Tailwind CSS we updated, we included our reset, we added our background, our colors in from our color tokens, reset, we had our show. And I think we're making some good progress here on this Tailwind config file. One thing that I want to try and do maybe is just, it probably is worth trying to figure out how I get the variable in there from here, from the token. And perhaps we leave ourselves a to-do here. It's like to-do figure out Way to add font token values to variables. I kind of want to tie it all up so it's all in one place. I don't want to have multiple places to configure the fonts. So I'll leave that token there. I think everything else is fine. Colors good, fonts good, fine. Cool. We've not really added anything new, but we've added some configuration files. Configure Tailwind within as a utility class generator. Kind of how we're using it as part of the cube. And cool, that's all committed. So what have we done today? We've had a good session actually. I think I'm quite happy with progress I made. So we've mapped out our flow as the user experience flow. We've created some notes along the way. As part of this, we kind of built out a bit of a domain language that we're going to use. We've got the flow where this is the flow we're going to be building. We're going to be able to create a new meeting. We're going to be able to upload a recording to that meeting. We're going to be able to kind of create a transcription from that recording. View that transcription. It's going to be made up of entries. Each entry is going to be a marker or an utterance, mostly utterances, which have speakers and a body of that utterance. That transcription, you can add the markers in to map your points where you started talking about different agenda points, and then you can generate the minutes from that. The minutes are going to generate for each agenda point, and you're going to get a summary for each agenda point that it generates. We've mapped out a bit of a domain entity relationship diagram, a very crude one, but it is an entity relationship diagram that defines all the entities we're going to have, some of the entities we're going to have, and it also mapped out those entities to some properties that they were going to have in a separate place, so we kind of know what fields we're going to need to add to each of those. We went through all of that, and then we jumped into writing some code. So we set up our Rails app. We talked about how we were going to use turn off the tests. We're going to use Tailwind. We're going to use Postgres. We set up our application template to use RSpec. So we're using RSpec for testing. And then we set up our page. We got our app running. We configured our welcome controller that's going to introduce the application, let people kind of a landing page for people to go to. Then we looked at setting up the Tailwind. We brought in some of the icons and graphics as well. We set up Tailwind. We looked at cube.css and cube.fyi rather is the domain there for that one of cube CSS, and set that up. And we've started building out our own kind of way of using Tailwind by configuring it quite heavily with the Tailwind config, and writing some styles in our style sheets, and also moving some of the design tokens out from within Tailwind and actually into our own JSON files where we can control them. We created our two colors we're going to use. We're going to use Porcelain and Polaris, and set up our fonts. And I think in the next session, what we'll probably start to do is create some basic spacing tokens that we can use. They won't be right initially, but we'll kind of build out from there. We'll set up some spacing styles. And then we'll probably start looking at structuring out some of the style sheets files, getting our kind of composition classes in there and some of those utilities as well. And then from there, we will start building some of these screens. I think we can very quickly finish up the CSS part, get our kind of base foundation in place, and then we'll be able to start writing our first controller and getting us set up so that we can creating a meeting and upload a recording is going to be the first goal, I think, in that session. But yeah, really happy with the progress made today. Thank you all for viewing and whoever's been watching along, and yeah, I'll be on tomorrow, I think. I'm not sure what time I'm going to start. probably be in the morning, but I'll make sure that these are uploaded anyway. There'll be VODs to watch back if anyone wants to watch from the beginning and then catch up on anything. Cool. I'm gonna wrap up there. Thank you. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.